Hi guys, we need to talk about Jogendra Mandal. And I hate making fun of dead people, but today it will be a little tough. Now, have you guys heard of Jogendra Mandal? I heard of him for the first time just 3 to 4 days back in where else but Sanjay Dikshit's book Unbreaking India. And I am so thankful to him for presenting the entire resignation letter written by Jogendra Mandal to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and explaining why he's quitting from this entire facade and fraud called Pakistan, and how he has been disillusioned with their politics, quote unquote gangsters method of politics, as mentioned by Ambedkar. Now, this letter is very important because he essentially encapsulates and is a microcosm of every liberal every misled liberal and leftist and Marxist that you have met in India. There's a bit of Nehruism in every liberal there's a bit of Raja Ram Mohan Roy in every liberal but in the modern setting you'll probably see, if you when you go through the entire letter, I'm going to give a brief summary of the letter. So please stick through the entire video because it's very long. I'm not going to read the entire letter but a brief summary. But it's very important because of how it relates to every leftist and how that every leftist, if they're honest enough, some years down the line are going to face the same problems and the same disillusionments that Jogendra Mandal faced in his work as the first law minister of Pakistan. He was essentially the equivalent of Ambedkar in Pakistan, and spoiler alert, he had to come back to India. He died in 1968 in India. So 70 years after Jogendra Mandal, a born Hindu who later became one of the central and leading founding fathers of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, resigned from Pakistan government and decided to return to India. His prophecies regarding the future of Pakistan as a successful nation state has become true. Born in 1904 in British Bengal, Jogendra Mandal went on to serve as a legislator and also Pakistan's first Minister of Law and Labour. Later, he was appointed as the second Minister of Commonwealth and Kashmir Affairs. However, a series of incidents in Pakistan, especially the targeted persecution of minorities, made him realize that the idea of Pakistan was bound to fail eventually, and you'll also learn that how this Indian Dalit leader class's notion of their supposed unity with Muslim politics is also very founded on nothing. There's no base to this idea. Like to quote Ambedkar, like he says, what's the unity that a Hindu sees with a Muslim? On the same lines. Ambedkar was intelligent enough to understand that problem. Jogendra Mandal was a little late to the party. As Jogendra Mandal decided to quit from the newly formed Pakistan government soon after partition, he wrote a letter to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Liaquat Ali Khan, which itself is explanatory as to why he chose to return to India. Here is a brief summary of his resignation letter that throws light not only on how Hindus and other minorities in Pakistan were systematically persecuted, but also on the active support of the founding fathers of Pakistan to commit such crimes against the Hindus in their quest to transform Pakistan into an Islamic republic, basically turning it into Darul Islam from Darul Harb. On October 9th, 1950, Jogendra Mandal sent his resignation to the then Pakistan Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan, writing how the sense of utter frustration at failing at his lifelong mission to uplift the backward Hindu masses of East Bengal had led him to feel compelled to tender his resignation from the cabinet. In his resignation letter, the Dalit leader has penned in much details on why he decided to not only quit from the Pakistan government but also return back to India after years of disagreeing to the idea of India, and he in fact I wanted the partition to happen and supported the separation of Pakistan from British India. Mandal, in his letter to Pakistan Prime Minister, gives a short background of important events that took place during the period of his cooperation with the Muslim League. According to Mandal, his principal objectives to join hands with the Muslim League was the economic interests of scheduled castes in Pakistan, and secondly, that the scheduled castes and Muslims were both educationally backward. To quote him, I was persuaded that my cooperation with the League and its ministry would lead to the undertaking on a wide scale of legislative and administrative measures which, while promoting the mutual welfare of the vast bulk of Bengal's population and undermining the foundations of vested interest and privilege, would further the cause of communal peace and harmony. This is what he wrote in his resignation letter. Now, he further writes, I was the only scheduled caste member returned to the federation ticket. I was included in Sohrawardi's cabinet, who was the guy who executed the Direct Action Day genocide in 1946. The 16th day of August that year was observed as the Direct Action Day by the Muslim League. It resulted in a Holocaust. Jogendranath Mandal calls 1946 Direct Action Day a Holocaust. The Noakhali riot followed the Calcutta carnage in October 1946. There, Hindus including scheduled castes were killed and hundreds were converted to Islam. Hindu women were raped and abducted. Members of my community also suffered the loss of life and property. Now, highlighting the communal riots, Mandal wrote that the terrible sufferings of Hindus had overwhelmed him with grief. However, he continued the policy of cooperation with the Muslim League. Further, in October 1946, upon the invitation of Sohrawardi to join the interim government of India, I joined the interim government on November 1, 1946. Mandal mentions in his letter, Mandal says after a few months that the British government made their June 3rd statement embodying certain proposals for the partition of India, the whole country, especially entire non-Muslim India. And this really surprised Jogendranath Mandal. For the sake of truth, he writes, I must admit that I had always considered the demand of Pakistan by the Muslim League as a bargaining counter. Although I honestly felt that in the context India as a whole, in India, Muslims had legitimate cause for grievance against upper caste Hindu chauvinism. I held the view very strongly indeed that the creation of Pakistan would never solve the communal problem. Mandal justifies his support for country's partition. However, years later, a disappointed Mandal adds, now quoting Mandal again, on the contrary, it would aggravate communal hatred and bitterness. Besides, I maintained that it would not ameliorate the condition of Muslims in Pakistan. The inevitable result of the partition of the country would be to prolong, if not perpetuate, the poverty, illiteracy and miserable condition of the toiling masses of both the states. I further apprehended that Pakistan might turn to be one of the most backward and undeveloped countries of Southeast Asia region. On the attempts made by Pakistan establishment to transform the country into an Islamic country, Mandal writes, I must make it clear that I have thought that an attempt would be made, as is being done at present, to develop Pakistan as a purely Islamic state based on the Shariat and the injunctions and formularies of Islam. I don't know why he was surprised by this. He was, for God's sake, cooperating with a party called Muslim League. Why did he think it would be a secular league or a scientific league? He was cooperating with Muslim League. And of course they wanted, why blame them now? Of course they wanted an Islamic state. As is being done at present, to develop Pakistan as a purely Islamic state based on the Shariat and the injunctions and formularies of Islam. I presume that it would be set up in all essentials after the pattern contemplated in the Muslim League resolution adopted at Lahore on March 23, 1940. He further writes that he has fortified his faith in this resolution and statements of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who on 11th August 1947 had assured to give equal treatment for Hindus and Muslims alike and calling upon them to remember that they were all Pakistanis. Now, Jogendranath Mandal writes in this context, there was then no question of dividing the people on the basis of religion into full-fledged Muslim citizens and Zimmis being under the perpetual custody of the Islamic State and its Muslim citizens, although he was cooperating with a party called Muslim League. Jogendranath Mandal, criticizing the attempts, adds every one of these pledges made by Jinnah is in being flagrantly violated, and it is in complete disregard of the Quaid-e-Azam's wishes and sentiments and to the detriment and humiliation of the minorities. On partition of Bengal, Mandal, who was opposed to the partition of Bengal, writes how he had to face not only tremendous resistance from all quarters but also unspeakable abuse, insult and dishonor. So the worst he faced from Hindus is abuse, insult and dishonor, and he left Pakistan because he was now fearing for his life. And that he faced abuse, insult and dishonor for doing so, for opposing the partition of Bengal. He writes, it is a matter of gratitude that my appeal to 7 million scheduled caste people of Pakistan evoked a ready and enthusiastic response from them. They lent me their unstinted support, sympathy, and encouragement, notes Mandal in his resignation letter to Pakistan PM. Further, Mandal points out how he had spoken to Khwaja Nazimuddin at Karachi, requesting him to take 2 scheduled caste ministers in the East Bengal cabinet. He promised to do the same sometime later. However, Mandal says what happened subsequently in this regard was a record of unpleasant and disappointing negotiations. Now on anti-Hindu policy. Pointing out that the then Chief Minister of Bengal, Sohrawardy, had promised safety to the scheduled caste of Bengal from the anticipated dangerous result of partition, Mandal writes that Chief Minister of Bengal had even issued a statement declaring that none of the rights and privileges hitherto enjoyed by the scheduled caste people would be curtailed after partition, and that they would not only continue to enjoy the existing rights and privileges but also receive additional advantages. However, these assurances, Mandal writes, now quoting Mandal, "To my utter regret, it is to be stated that after partition, particularly after the death of Quaid-e-Azam, the scheduled castes have not received a fair deal in any matter. I brought to your notice incidents of barbarous atrocities perpetrated by the police on frivolous grounds. I did not hesitate to bring to your notice the anti-Hindu policy pursued by the East Bengal government, especially the police administration and a section of Muslim League leaders." What a surprise. Their name is Muslim League. Incidents of atrocities against Hindus in Pakistan. In his letter to Prime Minister Khan, Mandal cited a series of incidents where Hindus and other minorities were persecuted by the Islamists in several communal riots that took place after partition. He mentions about an incident that took place at a village called Digharkul near Gopalganj, where on the false complaint of a Muslim, brutal atrocities were committed on the local Namashudras. He writes how authorities accepted the complaint made by Muslims as true and sent armed police to the spot to punish the Namashudra Dalits. This brutal action on the part of the local authority created panic over a large area. Now quoting from his letter, "The second incident of police repression took place in the early part of 1949 under a police station of Gournodi in the district of Borishal. It's in Bangladesh. Here, a quarrel took place between 2 groups of members of a union board. One group, which was in the good book of the police, conspired to punish the opponents on the plea of the attack on the police station. The police, helped by the armed forces, then raided a large number of houses in the area, took away valuable properties, even from the houses of absentee owners who were never in politics, far less in the Communist Party," writes Mandal. Mandal says he wrote to the district magistrate and the SP for an inquiry, but his letters to the district authorities were not acknowledged. "I then brought this matter to the notice of the highest authority in Pakistan, including yourself, but to no avail," he adds. He continues, "The atrocities perpetrated by the police and military on the innocent Hindus, especially the scheduled caste of Harbinger in the district of Sleet, deserve description. Innocent men and women were brutally tortured, some women ravished, their houses raided, and properties looted by the police and the local Muslims. As per Mandal, the military not only oppressed these people and took away stuff forcibly from Hindu houses, but also forced Hindus to send their womenfolk at night to the camp to satisfy the carnal desires of the military." Mandal says despite appraising the matter to Prime Minister, no action was forthcoming. At Nachol, in the name of suppression of communists, the police and the local Muslims oppressed the Hindus and looted their properties, which led Sautals, or as non-Bengali speakers pronounce, Santhals, which led Santhals then cross the border and came over to West Bengal, Mandal writes. So this was a reason that Santhals of Bangladesh had to come to India. Subsequently, the innocents of the entire village encouraged the neighboring Muslims to take away their properties. A number of persons who were killed and men and women were forcibly converted. Household deities were broken and places of worship desecrated and destroyed. Several women were raped by the police, military, and local Muslims. Mandal narrates about the atrocities against Hindus in Pakistan, especially by the authorities who had vowed to protect them. He adds, "I visited Kalashira and 1 or 2 neighboring villages on February 28, 1950. When I came to the village Kalshira, I found the place desolate and in ruins. I was told in the presence of SP that there were 350 homesteads in this village. Of these, only 3 had been spared and the rest had been demolished." Country boats and heads of cattle belonging to the Namashudras had been all taken away. Narrating an interesting incident, Mandal writes, in the second week of February 1950, when the budget session of the East Bengal Assembly commenced, the Congress members sought permission to move the two adjournment motion to discuss the situation created at Kalshira and Nachol. But the motions were disallowed. The Congress members walked away out of the assembly in protest. This action of the Hindu members of the assembly annoyed and enraged not only the ministers but also the Muslim leaders and officials of the province. Just the fact that the Congress leaders walked away. This was perhaps one of the principal reasons for Dhaka and East Bengal riots in February 1950, writes Jogendra Mandal. The fact that Congress leaders walked away from the discussion. That pissed them off. Officers helped Muslim mobs to loot Hindus. What is more shocking is the authorities joining hands with the mobs to commit crimes against Hindus during Dhaka riots. Arson, looting of Hindu shops and houses and killing of Hindus wherever they were found commenced in full swing in all parts of the city, which were committed even in the presence of high police officials. Mandal notes how jewelry shops belonging to the Hindus were looted in the presence of police officers. Mandal says the police did not attempt to stop loot but instead helped the looters with advice and direction. That we love more reservation in police admissions. According to Mandal, the reasons for the Dhaka riot were mainly 5. First, the Muslims wanted to punish the Hindus for the daring action of their representatives in the assembly, the daring action of walking out. Second, the differences between the Surawardi group and the Nazimuddin in the parliamentary party were becoming acute. A movement for a reunion of East and West Bengal by both Hindu and Muslim leaders was also the reason for the attacks on Hindus, writes Mandal. To prevent such a move, large-scale communal riots were orchestrated in East Bengal and was sure to produce reactions in West Bengal where Muslims might be killed. Fourth, the feeling of antagonism between the Bengali Muslim and the non-Bengali Muslim in East Bengal was gaining ground, and to avoid hatred between Hindus and Muslims of East Bengal. Finally, the consequences of non-devaluation and Indo-Pakistan trade deadlock to the economy of East Bengal were being felt most acutely, first in urban and rural areas, and the Muslim League members and officials wanted to divert the attention of the Muslim masses from the impending economic breakdown by some sort of jihad against the Hindus.